All right. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? How is it going? I am Is There No One Else? Today's video, we're going to do something a little bit different on my channel. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I haven't done it yet because I got in my own head, long story short. We are going to go through the comments section on a very controversial post that was made by Gilliam the Rogue. As you guys know, this is the last video that I did, kind of talking about their changes and everything. We're not going to go through what Gilliam wrote. I just really want to see what the community has to say, because we have 10 pages, and I figured it'd be fun to read through them, read through some interesting ones, maybe provide some comments, some feedback, some thoughts of my own. Yeah, so definitely a little bit more different. If you guys enjoy this, let me know. If you guys don't enjoy this, also let me know, so that I don't do them anymore and waste your guys' time. So yeah, let's dive into it. ESO Nightingale, may we finally see Arctic Blast become a good damage skill, I wonder. All right, so the Cliff's notes on Gilliam's post, he did a discussion about update 35, talking about weaving, talking about reducing light attack damage by roughly 50%-ish. What was the other thing? Also, damage over time and healing over time will also be reduced as well. And so they're going to increase the duration of a lot of these abilities and lower the overall effect per tick. And so that kind of, like I said, that kind of has some interesting aspects to it, because if you're getting less damage per dot per tick, what that means is you're going to have less dot pressure. And if they have to counteract that by reducing healing, that means all those radiating regenerations and figures and potentially bubbles and all those other sorts of things might get reduced as well. And so this healing meta that we currently have could see a drastic reduction, which is, you know, it's not a bad thing. Obviously, I would just like to see healing get adjusted, but one of the side effects of what they're talking about, that could be one of those things. And so, yeah, that's the Cliff Notes of what they talked about. Let's see what some people say. Of course, this will be annoying to me because weaving is a really fun aspect to the game. However, on the plus side, I look forward to tanks' parses increasing. It would be really cool to see tank weaving result in some nifty damage control and some group gameplay. A tank crow, giving the group empowering grasp and then using it to parse hard. Chef's kiss. Oh, okay. I mean, weaving's still going to exist. It's just not going to be as effective. Say psych right now. Well, let's check out. So we got 13 insightful, 1 agree, 22 awesome. I'm just curious to see if we get a good old-fashioned ratio here. So not here, DJ Muscle. They finally get to address one of the staples of the game, which was in need of tuning. Hopefully this will be followed by a lot of other necessary changes to the game systems. Okay. You know, from one Tamriel to now, we've seen change after change to combat, and the gap between the floor and the ceiling never really shrinks. It actually increases. Like, at some point, you guys are going to have to accept that players who are doing it low damage are largely doing so because they don't see any reason to improve, or they're not doing content that warrants it. Yes, some people have disabilities, and no odds are the light attack, bow spammer, Argonian, and heavy armor, and your random vet isn't disabled. You can make whatever change you want, hybridize however much you want, nerf buff however much you want. Players at the low end will never stop being low end unless they want to. I agree. And the first ratio, I think, appears right here. I completely agree with this. I've been thinking about doing a video about this because they keep trying. I was going to do a video about it with respect to Oakensoul, but I think we can both agree that Oakensoul content kind of needs a little bit of a break. It's been fun, but it needs a little bit of a break. And so I do agree with this, because they constantly have been trying to do different things. And the thing is, guys, good players stay good. It doesn't matter what, like, the things that happen every patch is ZeniMax introduces something game breaking, you know, whether it's Oakensoul, whether it's Slodes, whether it's Crimson, Malakath, doesn't matter. Like, introduce your most broken thing, right? Well, players get mad at it. A lot of players get mad at it because, you know, like a player like myself, I look at it and I'm like, man, everybody's going to be running that because it's busted. That's going to get really boring over time. It's going to be really dumb to fight every single class running that exact same setup over and over and over again, because that's what it is. It's boring. It doesn't matter what patch it is. If you look back at No Proc was fun for a while. It started to die off because people found it boring because there weren't many sets you could run. And it's the same thing when you introduce overtuned stuff. And the other thing that happens is you get a lot of people that say, I'm not running that cheesy shit. I'm not running that cheesy shit. It's so cheesy. I'm not going to do it. And so people get this brief reprieve where they have much stronger gear than other people. And eventually people succumb and they're like, you know what? If I'm going to enjoy PvP, like two things happen. Either people quit PvPing because they're not dealing with the BS, or they typically succumb to PvP, to the changes. And so what happens is the people that are all excited about these changes get really hyped up about it. And then all of a sudden they're dying to it and they complain about it. It reminds me of something that happened a couple of years ago where I got into a discussion on the forums with somebody about proc sets. And they told me that ZeniMax balances proc sets well, and they do a really good job with it. And so nothing about proc sets is overtuned. And I disagreed. I had a lot of sets in my head that, that were very, very busted. And he was like, nope, ZeniMax is never wrong here. They always balance sets perfectly. Everything's fine. Well, that guy got into a BG with 2 heavy attack stam DKs that nuked him while he was in Colossus over and over and over again. And he went to the forums to complain about, little drum roll here, just pretend there's a drum roll. He went to complain about proc sets. And so that's what happens. People want what's for them. And then all of a sudden when it happens to them, they don't like it very much. And so that's just the way it goes. And you're going to see it a lot, and it happens all the time. But the thing is the sandbox is still the sandbox. Everybody plays by the same rules. The good players remain the same, remain good players. If you want to move up in the sandbox, don't look for the cheesy set to help you advance temporarily. Look for ways to improve in the game. That's how you get better, so that when those sets come out, you're even better. That's the gist of it. So we got another post here from React Faster. Well, this to me sounds like the nail in the coffin for ESO combat as we enjoy it currently. It is truly a shame that ZeniMax had felt the need to tear down the skill ceiling time and time again, and now seems to be targeting the core mechanics that veteran players have appreciated for 8 years. Accessibility is great, but not when it completely nullifies the effort and practice of the veteran players that have supported your game for its entire life cycle. Gilliam, what you're proposing here seems like it is being done with little to no regard whatsoever for the PvP side of the game, like many of the changes made in recent years. These changes would create a drastically different PvP environment where the already small skill gap becomes clearly non-existent. You mentioned that you'd be paying attention to the PTS feedback closely, but the wording in your post seems so definite that I have no delusions that these changes will be going live, regardless of what the community thinks. Thanks for betraying our trust again, ZeniMax. Another ratio. There's a couple things I disagree with here. I agree mostly with what React's saying. React is a very good player. He definitely knows what he's talking about. The direction of the game is not good, at least from a PvP perspective. When you look at it from a PvP side, they don't really care about changes. They introduce stuff and then they ignore it. And so when you look at changes, they said that they were going to monitor closely the hybridized changes that they made a couple patches ago. Have you seen any tweaks to anything as we've gone on? No, like they made a couple changes during this last patch, but that was it. They're not closely monitoring those things. When you look at PCNA, and not a lot of people are on PCNA, but no CP Cyrodiil was a huge part of PCNA. Like arguably the biggest campaign at times. It was that and Greyhost. They were always full bard. Well, what ZeniMax decided to do was, which nobody wanted, even I said it. Like, I'm not a fan of proc sets, and I can outwardly say this. I'm not a proc set fan. I don't want them removed from the game. And so what they did is they said that their no CP, is it Ravenwatch, will have no proc sets. And guess what? Lo and behold, nobody plays in there because it's not balanced very well. There's no proc sets. There's no build diversity. Like, everybody down there is like in Pariah and Spinners or Spriggans, and you can't really kill anybody because you don't have the high damage sets. You don't have the high damage sets, or like the good damage sets, but you do have the good tank sets like Pariah. And so it's just not very fun, and so people don't go down there to PvP very often. It's not pop locked. It's not enjoyable anymore, and so that's been going on. How long has Ravenwatch been no CP or has been no proc? 3 patches now, 4 patches now, no changes at all. No changes at all. And so when you look at it from a PvP perspective, and I've made some of these comments before, and maybe this video will get posted on the forums or whatever, so I want to make this clear. I think it's great that other content gets stuff every patch. Like every patch you get new dungeons or potentially a new trial or new overland content. I think all that is fantastic. PvP hasn't gotten a good change since 2019. It's been 3 years. Now, I'm not saying that, like, if you're not a PvP fan, I'm not saying all of a sudden become a PvP fan. All I'm trying to say is at least acknowledge that 3 years of no changes and no big nothing for the community, and ignoring things like overtuned and broken stuff, and then also not improving things and then just letting things die like Ravenwatch. That stuff's really annoying. It's really annoying for players. And so when you see all these things, and then when you see this type of patch change from our perspective, and your perspective's obviously different because you're in a different avenue of the game. From our perspective, it's just, here we go again, which is what my thumbnail was like great, here we go again. And yeah, I don't think that they're going to pay close attention to feedback. I mean, maybe I'm traditionally an optimist, and I am extremely pessimistic about this because this is just the history. This has just been the last 2 years. They don't listen to feedback on anything. And so, yeah, like why would they start listening to feedback now? That's just my opinion. Why every combat change you make is always something players don't look forward to, limiting or even killing their hype and joy of the upcoming update. Cool. Another ratio. Yeah. Like, why can't we get excited about stuff? You know what I mean? Like, how hard would it be to introduce something exciting? Like new dungeons and content, that's exciting for PvE players. But why can't you just say, hey, we got a new map, new PvP content. The combat we're looking at, we're looking at making things, we're going to address the things that you guys are saying with combat is a problem. Namely, some of the block casting doesn't work. Like, block just doesn't work properly. We're going to go readdress block. That's something you can go back and rehash because it's not very functional. Those are the types of changes that people would get excited about because these are the things that people complain about. Who's complaining about light attacks? Come on. I agree with the gap not changing much, but also I don't think a lot of casual players realize how low they really are in the ladder. I myself am disabled, and for the longest time I thought my DPS was fine. Turned out I was parsing 15k. Now I'm up to 70k. That's personally perfect by me, but the average player may not even understand the numbers. And the game's tutorial really just gives the basics. Let players discover it if they want to. We also do a terrible job of fostering curiosity in new players. For the longest time, I was scared to do any content because Zone was belittling everything that wasn't meta. We've gotten better. This was years ago, but depending on when and where a new player starts, the community can be very off-putting. I agree with this. This is actually a very good point. And yeah, there isn't much tutorial on what your damage is. Like, you really have to go out. I think a lot of people watching this video take for granted what resources we have via websites. If you look at Nephis or PvP websites or whatever available to us, Alcast website, for instance, and just YouTube content available. Not everybody knows where to look on these things. Like, think about if you're a new player. Would you necessarily know which websites and know what stuff's reputable and know which information is reputable? You just want to play the game. There's plenty of games you play where they provide the tutorial information that you need, and you can get by with just that. This is not, in my opinion, this is not one of those games. So, and this is a perfect example. Like, I've seen it all the time where somebody's struggling. Like, they've been playing for a while and they didn't know about 5-piece set bonuses. They didn't know about efficiently making a build, and there's lots of resources for that, but sometimes it's not easy to find. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through some things. We're going to go through a couple pages, so I don't want to. This is a kind of way of buffing direct damage classes, because changes of the dot and hot meaning more chances of making mistakes in battles, which mean more wipes a team that may bring many DPS of dots. Okay, that was a very weird way to say that. You guys could also start to teach weaving as a core combat mechanic in tutorial or something in the game. Then the gap between new players and veterans would also shrink. Might also be nice for a new guy in my VSG pug that only spams bow light attacks if he would know he can use light attack and acid spray during the same global cooldown. Yeah, agreed. There's another comment in here. I don't know if we're going to find it. I was reading through this earlier, but somebody made a comment that they went out and, you know, if you go play the card game, they have an entire tutorial on how to play through the card game. There is no tutorial on how to do mechanics in PvP. And I've talked about this a lot. The resources available in-game are not very good. And so, yeah, I talked about it in the video earlier. We're reading comments, but yeah, like this is something, it's just a disparity. Like you have this game, this combat or, you know, gameplay for the card game, but you don't have it for the actual game, which is effective for everything, like everything else. So on the face of these look like good changes for the long-term balance. Okay. My main concern is content, specifically how historically content has never been adjusted to accommodate nerfs in combat. As you know, every new DLC, the new vet hard mode content for that DLC is balanced around what is possible at the top end. Consider the speed run time for Dread Sale, for example. Sure. And for many people for whom content objectives are out of reach, the gradual power creep in each patch is what allows them to tackle things a year or so down the line. So it's rather concerning that we get a power nerf right after the introduction of a new trial. That's a good point. Second, the dungeons and trials seem pretty hell-bent on increasing the strength of dot damage on tanks in newer content, especially in Rock Grove and Dreadsail, even though we haven't had a healing power creep like we've had a DPS power creep. If you nerf the hots that are essential to countering those dots, then I should hope that there will be adjustments from the content side to match. Okay, so this is more of a PvE perspective. I can't comment too much on this, but this is pretty well thought out, I think. Oh, no, no, no. All right. Think this will be unpopular, but it'll be a nice change for those with hand or wrist problems. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I think there should be, I think you can keep light attack damage the way it is and provide more DPS like parses that also don't have to light attack weave. I've always been bad at weaving. Been lucky as a Templar to get by without it for the most part, with a longer than usual channeled spammable and a channeled execute ability. So I may be biased when I say I can get behind a nerf to light weaving. I'm also interested in combat effects being extended, as I agree most of my time spent with my eyes glued to my hotbar, refreshing dots as they expire, not really paying attention to the action around me outside of imminent red AoE, so I think done right this could be a good change. I don't necessarily agree with the second part. The thing is once you master your rotation, you stop looking at your bars. Like it just kind of comes with feeling, you know? However, my one pressing concern for these changes is the current content also going to be adjusted to compensate for these changes? We're looking at a rough 10% reduction in damage, and healing is also being affected. How are the hard mode trials going to play out now? Bearing in mind Unchained Animals, the top team in the world, currently got their VDSR trifecta with 1.5 minutes to spare. What sort of message does that send to the rest of the player base if it looks to be nigh unachievable for them? I would very much hope that the combat team is having regular conversations and updates with the encounters team. As from recent updates, it almost seems like they're working on two different games. Yeah, there's multiple different games in ESO. I definitely agree with that part. And yeah, impacts to trials. I definitely, and this is a huge point that we could talk about in this video. They're worried about healing for these trials in hard mode. And this is the second time they brought it up. There's no issue with healing in PvP. You know what I mean? Like there's no issue with healing in PvP the way it currently is. But the way it currently is, there's issues apparently with healing in PvE. And so this is where you need to start looking at things and addressing them separately and addressing how things interact in both these environments. Because right now, if you're just a PvPer and you don't know anything about trials and you saw a buff to healing next patch, you'd be like, why? Like, why do you need a buff to healing? It makes sense. I'm not saying that they shouldn't get it, you know? Like, if you're not able to complete content because the dot damage is that high, and I don't know for sure. Like, I have no idea. But that's how these things are different. Like they're two different games. PvP and PvE are two completely different games. I'm going to keep hammering on this because it needs to be. This needs to be ingrained that they're two different things and they can be addressed separately. So, yeah. Looks like it's time to finally sweep out the last remnants of the endgame community. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I can't say that it's not an attempt to. Like, think about how much the endgame community has gone through. And I'm like, think about how much they've gone through with respect to lag, performance, still playing this game, all the support to a game that they really enjoy. Like, you have actual diehards. Like, your end game community, what's left are literal diehards. And you're just like, you know what? We know you've been dealing with all this, and you've been going through it all, and it's been frustrating and whatever. Well, we're gonna frustrate you a little bit more with, changes that you don't want. um, I'm not saying everybody says that. It's I think so far the majority do not want the changes. There's been a 3-4 people that have enjoyed it. But dots are mostly ineffective in PvP already, save for outliers and a broken set or two. Not sure watering them down in intensity in favor of duration makes sense when the burst is still king and hot stacking is still there. If you water both down, it's just all burst damage and heals. Yeah, but I'm assuming they're also going to adjust healing. I'm assuming they are. Because if you're going to increase the duration on these things, you also, if you just nerf dots and you don't touch healing, that's going to be extremely problematic. At least from a PvP perspective. Truly don't understand catering to those who still aren't going to utilize these changes while shafting those who can and do. Yep, I agree with that too. I understand the catering for people with, disabilities and playing the game, but I thought that's what Oaken Soul was for. I thought Oaken Soul was supposed to be the kind of equalizer, the buff time equalizer. That's why people are running it, right? Like why do we need both? I'm not saying don't provide stuff to them. I'm definitely not saying that. You'll never hear me say that. It's just we seem to really be going all in this department in a way that doesn't really need to be done. You want feedback? Really? Why make the game even more boring? Maybe I'm too old, but some people play games for the challenge and to improve. I don't want everything to be easy. Yeah, I agree with that. Completely agree. This is why I play games. If a game is too easy, I get bored of it and I don't want to play it anymore. There's a reason I don't do a lot of the quests in the game. It's not because the quests couldn't be fun. It's because everything ends quickly. Like if I go up and I kill a boss during a quest line, they have like 100k health. It's a couple attacks, they die. And if somebody else is there, they might be dead and I have to wait for them to respawn. It's just not very enjoyable. And so you have, and once again, like this is why there's a difference in this game. And it's okay. Like you have high-end end game hard mode trials, you have veteran trials, you have normal trials, you have veteran dungeons, you have hard mode dungeons, you have normal dungeons, you have overland content, which is like really good for beginners, and then you have PvP environments. And so you have all these different things, and they're all different avenues for different types of players. My brother, for instance, was playing this game for a bit, and he never really got into it very far. He got up to like level 25 or level 30, but he enjoyed doing the quests and stuff because that's very good for beginners. He was a casual player. It's not an insult to say somebody's a casual player when they play the game casually. It's okay. It's okay to say you're casual. Like, I don't know why there's a stigma about it. And so I don't think he would ever want, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see the point in allowing or catering everything to be like that. Like you should have a variety of everything. You should have some easy content. You should have some harder content. You should have some even harder content. And you should really push the boundaries with some very top end, very, very difficult content and provide some very prestigious rewards and titles because it's bragging rights. And bragging rights is something that gets people talking and gets people wanting to play. You don't slowly lower it over time to let people all have it. That's not how, like, you can drive competition. You can get people playing. You can get people working towards these things if you created an avenue for it to happen. It's not that hard. It really isn't. Like think about, I just want to provide an example, right? They want to do these weekend events, okay? What if one of the weekends is hard mode trials, right? And not hard mode trials, I'm sorry, hard mode dungeons. You know, you put in this weekend system, you put it in for dungeons, and you have a dungeon tournament. Whoever can complete the most 4-man hard mode dungeon content with the least deaths, maybe start at one dungeon or whatever, or do a couple. You can track these things on, with trials. I don't, maybe this would obviously take a while for dungeons, but you could implement something like this, and you could have like a season where you get people pushing towards doing content like this, and the reward is something substantial. You reward something substantial, like 1 million gold per person, a stack, whatever you want to say, a stack of chromium platings, or tempering alloys, or whatever. You can reward them with really nice things for completing top end stuff, and a title. You do stuff like that, competitive stuff with fun rewards, with fun titles. That's all you have to do. And you track it, and you provide a system that tracks deaths, times, scores, like content completed. It would be it wouldn't be that difficult. Maybe implementing everything and introducing the game would be difficult, but that sort of thing would drive competition for hard mode content, dungeon hard mode content, and people would want to do it. I've talked a lot about battlegrounds and stuff, and things you can drive there. I don't think we have to go into that anymore. Like you can do so many different things for battlegrounds. You can adjust the scores. Like, actually, no, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. We might as well. We're here. Battlegrounds the stats are a waste of time. I'm sorry for those of you guys that get high in the battleground scores, but you could track so many different things. You could track kill death ratio, kills per match, overall kills, overall deaths, healing per match, overall scores and you separate it by scores per game, not scores with accumulation. The current scoring system is based off of who plays the most, really. Like, you have to be a better player, but it's who plays the most battlegrounds. And it's dropped off. People don't compete in it as much anymore because the rewards aren't that good. There's no good sets available in battlegrounds anymore. Nobody wants to run the sets in battlegrounds, so they're not going to go and try and get the leaderboard scores for battlegrounds. See how the competition just changes things? So if you change those things on the leaderboards and you did it off of, minimum 20 matches a week, highest kill death ratio gets this. Highest score per game gets this. Highest heals per game gets this. Then you would see people playing again. Then you would see stuff. And you can incentivize with gold materials. Gold materials is just never ending. Like, let's be honest about gear. Gear comes and goes. Gear comes, goes, disappears forever sometimes. And if you want to keep content evergreen, provide materials. Provide materials that people will use and make it worth it. And you could easily do that. This may come as a shock to y'all. I hope as shocking as reading these combat previews left me before I acted upon it. Page and email, scoured email, so I could come here, sign in, and tell you. These aspects of a dynamic, active, reactive, and robust combat system that you announced as inaccessible problems, points needing overhaul just now, are actually what has separated this game from all others for 8 years straight from a gameplay stance, with additions such as being TES-based communities so much that make the game the only game so people have played exclusively for 8 years. Okay, they snipped a bunch of this. Because the only thing bad about the combat was bad performance, which y'all just started improving. Please discard everything you just announced and pick another direction. I agree. I mean, I've been playing this game for 7 years myself. I've been playing this game for 7 years. This is the longest I've ever played a game. There's a reason I enjoy it as much as I do. It's the combat. And people have brought up other things like, it's not like World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft does this. This is the only game like this. And it should be more like this. No, you don't make this game like other things. This game stands on its own. If I wanted to go play World of Warcraft or World of Warcraft style combat, I would go sign up for World of Warcraft. I would go play another game. I don't want to play another game. I've been playing this game for 7 years. I've enjoyed this combat for 7 years. Why would I want the combat to change? I don't want it to change. You have a bunch of players like me that have been enjoying this combat for a very, very long time, and you're just tweaking something that's your main selling point. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Been playing since the closed beta of the game. You've always tried to lower the gap between pro and the new players, but you always ended up to fail and get things worse. Most of the players already said a lot of obvious things about this useless change, but let me add the fact that even if you will give to light attack a flat damage, they will always be done perfectly by the good players and the gap will remain. Also, the new players tend to spam light attacks with some skills when they remember or tend to spam skills without light attacks. The first case is the most common one. If you nerf the light attack, you're just going to get things worse to all the casual players that live the game, that probably love the game. On the other hand, you're making the endgame content of the game very boring for the veteran community. Whoever thought about these changes over the years should really change perspective. Yeah, I don't disagree. We want your feedback on our combat preview and proposals. Wait, not that kind of feedback. I don't like this change. I don't like constant narrowing of the skill gap in the game. You're catering to an extremely casual section of the player base. The majority of players who this change will benefit will not even have the awareness of gameplay mechanics to notice it. I agree. So they're casual. They're so casual they are unlikely to be around in a few months, but players who've been playing the game for 8 years get their feedback ignored and changes introduced that make the game worse. It's frustrating, but not surprising. Everyone needs a participation trophy. See Oaken Soul, weaving, cloak changes, hybridization, cast times and ults, animation canceling, and removal. I agree. I completely agree. Why you're catering to a group of players that really don't understand the combat just doesn't make much sense to me. I'm tired of this mess. Zoss, why are you never satisfied with your combat changes? Been playing since 2015, and you spent the better part of that time changing combat balance. I understand that changes are part of the long-term plans, but it gets taxing. I spent more time trying to unlearn what I know about combat than trying to learn the new systems. Balance is not just about flexibility and making changes. Balance is about stability and reliability, something that Zoss has never apparently achieved. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to go through this every single year since launch. Minor changes, yes, I think we can all see that, but major ones? Also, you never make adjustments to PvE content to match your changes. Just tired of it all, which means my incentive to keep tossing you money just went down again. Once again, I don't know how you can disagree with this. Like, I'm going to do a video in the future here going through like the history of this dev team and how they've 180'd. I've been thinking about it. I want to make sure I get it done well, but long story short, they introduce stuff and like I don't know. My vision, like on a combat team, is that they have a vision of how they want combat to play, and then they employ their vision. And so when you look at their first couple of changes, one of the biggest sweeping patches they came out with was Scale Breaker. And I talked about it in my previous video, but they increased dots by like 90, 100%. They increased vigor by 85%, but reduced the duration down to 5 seconds. It was at 10 seconds or 8 seconds or whatever, then they reduced it down to 5. Now it's going back up again. Kind of funny that they're reverting that because that's what we're talking about. But they did all these things, and they got a lot of complaints. And that patch, honestly, like in my opinion, Scale Breaker could have been good if they just adjusted Soul Trap and Entropy and brought it back to where they were. Those dots were unavoidable, and so they were hugely problematic in PvP, to a point to where people weren't even equipping spammables on some classes. They were just stacking dots and just, you try to purge, they just stack them again because it was cheap. That was the most efficient way to do combat. And so PvE got boring because they standardized everything so much. They made it so easy to do that every class was doing the same thing and nothing was unique. Nothing had its own power feel, And so people were all doing the exact same thing, and it got nerfed. And instead of making a slight nerf, they brought the hammer, and they completely reduced everything back to before what it was. Honestly, they nerfed it down lower than what it was before. And so all of a sudden we went through a few patches basically with no dots. I remember it was like week 3 or week 4 of the PTS. They eventually buffed it, but the strongest dot on DK during that patch notes was Volatile Armor. Volatile Armor had more damage than DK dots because that's how much they nerfed dots after the complaint. And so for me, it's not about the light attack damage. For me, I don't see the vision from ZeniMax. I don't see the vision from the developers here. I don't see where they're going. Like, it's one thing to buff dots and have this active reactive combat. I was honestly looking forward to Scalebreaker. I had a few minor qualms, but if they made those adjustments, dots being effective while burst damage being good and everybody being able to be killed, that's a good patch. That's a good patch from a PvP perspective. And they gutted it. And that's just one example. They've done it so many times now where they introduce something else and then they revert it. They introduce something else and then they revert it. And so it's like, where's the vision? Where's the idea of what the base game combat is going to be? Whatever it is, put your freaking foot down, decide what it is, and then employ it. And then make changes as you go, because this is ridiculous. Like, at this point, I'm not annoyed at the light attack changes. I'm annoyed that they're reverting the base game again, and all this time is going to be spent balancing something that probably doesn't need to be balanced, and all that time from developers could have gone towards new stuff. New and exciting stuff. This has been 3+ years of this, and we could have gotten so, like, once again, the PvP community hasn't gotten anything in 3 years. Okay. So you see them doing these things and you're like, okay, we don't want this. Like, why don't you work on something that we want? Why don't we all get wins? Like, do you really want to deal with forum backlash like this every single patch? Like, do you really want to deal with just people upset at the direction of the game? It doesn't make any sense to me. Just don't bars up, guys. Just don't weave, guys. Just don't keep your buffs up, guys. Anyways, here's my rotation. Whip go burr times 10. Whip go burr times 10. Alt F4. Tired of constant dumbing down the game and removing every ounce of skill gap that was left. Spent at least 7 years learning this game to perform well. Yeah. Update. This update is what horizontal progression looks like. Somerset 2018, light and heavy attacks scale with offensive resources. Lost depths 2022. Now they don't. Exactly. This is another perfect example. Like, they've reverted vigor. You know, it went from 10 seconds down to 5, and now it's going to go back up again. Light and heavy attacks scaled with your resources. Now they don't. Dots go up. Dots go down. These aren't slight tweaks. This isn't the sign of a development team that sees an idea for combat and they just need to make some small adjustments. It just feels like they're just throwing stuff at a wall and hoping something sticks, and then they go through and they do something else, and then, you know, they standardize all the proc sets and they get all the proc set damage. You know, back in Markarth, you know, they standardize all these proc sets. They finally got the proc sets to a good point, and then they introduced Malakath that buffs them all by 25% when they were already strong in no CP. Then they buff them by 25%, and then they nerf them to the ground. But a few patches later, now that they crit, and then after they can crit, because that was a problem when the proc sets first came out, after they can crit, let's introduce a mythic that gives them major force. Yeah. That's literally doing fucking everything you can with proc sets. Like there's no direction with any of that. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, we got through the first few pages. If you guys want to see more stuff like this, first 2 pages, I don't want to make this too long, but yeah, I would recommend going through and reading through the comment section and seeing everything that people write. And yeah, you guys can feel free to look at everything and provide your feedback as well. I would definitely provide feedback on this. It's whatever your feedback is. Guys, if you like the changes, you should comment. Like, if they're really looking for feedback, you should go comment and you should provide feedback on that. If you agree with me, you should definitely go provide feedback. Like, make this page as long as possible. Let them see how many players actually do not like these changes. Yeah, that's my opinion. Be constructive. Provide your opinion. Don't get banned. Yeah, that's gonna be the end of this video. If you guys have any questions or comments or opinions yourself, please provide in the section below. As always, guys, thank you for watching. Have a nice day.